Hello and welcome to Euronews Tonight. Let's take a look at the latest headlines. As talks fail to produce a breakthrough on Ukraine, Russia says it's run out of patience and demands a response from NATO and the US. Ukraine calls for three-way talks with the US and Russia. Downing Street apologizes to the Queen for hosting two lockdown parties held on the eve of the funeral of her husband, Prince Philip. Italy honors the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli, as he's laid to rest with a state funeral.
And Novak Djokovic once again faces the possibility of being deported as his Australian visa is cancelled for a second time.
Hello and welcome to the program. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has warned the West the Kremlin is running out of patience following a week of tense negotiations over military activity in Europe. NATO is calling on Russia to pull back its troops from Ukraine's eastern border, but Moscow says it must protect its own security. During his annual press conference on Friday, Lavrov outlined Russia's demands, calling on NATO to halt its expansion in Eastern Europe. Lavrov also said military bases being established on the Sea of Azov are a step too far.
In the Baltic region and in other countries in Northern Europe, new bases are being established in the Black Sea, and the English are setting up a base in Ukraine. They are building a base in the Sea of Azov, and we categorically cannot accept this. This is an unacceptable approach.
The Ukrainian government says it has been the victim of a cyber attack. Several key government websites, including the Ministry of Affairs, were taken offline following a suspected hack. Messages by the perpetrators were posted in Ukrainian, in Russian and Polish, warning citizens that their personal data had been compromised. This comes after 2,000 Russian troops carried out drills near Ukraine's eastern border. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our Russia Euronews analyst, Galina Polanskaya. Hi, Galina. So Sergei Lavrov has put the ball back into the court of the US and NATO, saying Russia is waiting for a response on its proposals. But those proposals have already been dismissed. So what exactly is Moscow expecting?
Hello. Well, Sergei Lavrov today said that Russia is expecting a very quick written response from the United States on all of the proposals of Russia during those security talks. And he said that if the proposals are rejected, the situation will be assessed and reported to the President Putin, and it will be Mr. Putin who will decide on the next step. All top Russian officials and diplomats have been saying that if the proposals are rejected, Russia will take all the necessary measures, but what those measures will be is not precise. And today, Foreign Minister Lavrov quoted once again Mr. Putin, who at the end of December said that Russia could give a military technical response to the north, to the NATO's eastward expansion, and that it could be very different, and it will depend on what military specialists will propose to Mr. Putin. So the question, what will Russia do? What will be its next step? The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says that the U.S. intelligence has developed information that Russia has been preparing the groundwork to have the option of fabricating a pretext of the invasion in Ukraine, including sabotage activities by accusing Ukraine of preparing military actions in the east of the country. Russia has been denying any such of accusations and allegations and says that it does not plan any attacks on Ukraine.
Now, Ukraine is calling for fresh talks with Russia and the US. Is President Putin likely to sit down with Biden and Zelensky?
Well, the Kremlin has not given any answer yet, but I would be very surprised if it happens, because you see, Russia says that, first of all, it is not a part in this conflict, and that Kyiv has to talk directly with the separatists in Donbass. Russia says that that's what the Minsk agreements say, and urges Kyiv to respect those agreements. We have been hearing this a lot, and right now Russia made it clear that it wants written answers on behalf of the US, and Minister Lavrov today said that it was only the United States who really could have a word in all of this situation around what is happening in Ukraine. So I don't think that Vladimir Putin is eager for such talks, but of course any surprises are possible. But what is for sure, that Mr. Putin is going to meet a president, the president of China, on the 4th of February. He will go to China and will attend the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and will talk with Xi Jinping. And of course, I think that China has also some questions about what is happening around Ukraine. But once again, Russia is expecting written answers and wants guarantees that Ukraine will never become a part of NATO. And today, Foreign Minister Lavrov said that Russia's patience has run out.
Galina Polinskaya, thank you for that update. Downing Street has issued an apology to the Queen following revelations of parties being held on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. The two staff events in April last year happened when government restrictions banned indoor socialising. Although not in attendance, it's the latest lockdown party scandal to hit Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Opposition parties and voices from within his own government have called on Johnson to resign. Well, for more on this, let's head over to Westminster and our reporter Tig Enright. So Tig, another day, another apology from Downing Street. Does the timing of this party on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral add any more pressure than the previous ones?
Yeah, it certainly does. Not only does it demonstrate disrespect to the Queen of England, the head of state, somebody who is respected, admired, even loved here, probably by most people in this country, but it also offers a stark illustration of the different interpretations of what it is to be a leader in a pandemic. There we saw the Queen of England mourning the loss of her husband. At his funeral, she sat alone with no friends or family to comfort her, even though she knew she would never see him again. Whereas the night before, those working in political leadership were having not one but two pretty major, pretty boozy parties, just because some among them were leaving their jobs. And it also offers more evidence that in all those times when Boris Johnson and his team in Downing Street have claimed that there were no breaches of COVID lockdown rules amid all these allegations of parties, it suggests that they indeed have been lying. I mean, keep in mind when Boris Johnson apologised to Parliament here on Wednesday for another party which he attended, he didn't actually admit wrongdoing. He was apologising for the impression caused by the controversy. Today, the Downing Street apologised to the Queen, but bizarrely it won't reveal exactly what it is apologising for. The long and short of it is, it's not ready to admit that there were illegal parties happening in Downing Street, even though all evidence is pointing clearly towards that.
Now, the opposition have been calling for him to resign, but his own party members have spoken out publicly in support of him. How much longer can he maintain their backing?
Well, some party members have been speaking out in favour of him. Some have been criticising him, have called upon him to resign. You know, at times like this, many people are looking towards cabinet members, those ambitious senior leaders in government, for knives behind their back, ready to plunge them into the leader of the moment for their opportunity. The focus at the moment is on the Finance Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the Foreign Minister, Liz Truss. Both have made public pronouncements in support of Boris Johnson. What they're doing in private is another thing entirely. But I think the key issue of concern for Boris Johnson is sentiment, not just among senior members of Parliament, but all members, all Conservative members of the Parliament building behind me here. 5 of them at the last count have called on him publicly to to resign. They have written formal letters of no confidence and submitted them to an important Conservative Party committee. The rules of the Conservative Party say that there have to be 54 such letters written and received before triggering a formal process which could remove Boris Johnson. Now, it is a secret process. We don't know exactly how many letters have been received. Given the mood in the party, I think it's hard to imagine that there wouldn't be more than those 5 who've declared publicly. And with leaks, more leaks of parties leaking today, just in the last hour or so before I'm speaking to you now, we've learned of another party leaving drinks for someone working, get this, on the government body which came up with COVID rules. So anger is certainly mounting in the general public. And if you're an MP, a Conservative MP, who's worried about losing your seat at the next election, you'll be asking yourself if Boris Johnson is the man to help you keep your seat at the next election, and how much damage he is doing to your chances if he sticks around for an awful lot longer.
Saga and Wright in Westminster, thank you for bringing us up to date. A state funeral has been held for the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli. His coffin entered the Grand Holy Mary of the Angels Church in Rome, draped in the EU flag. The Italian Prime Minister, as well as top EU officials, including Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, were in attendance. David Sassoli died on Tuesday after being hospitalized late last December. Well, let's go over to Shona Murray, who's in Rome for us. So, Shona, David Sassoli laid to rest today, a chance for his compatriots to say goodbye.
That's right, Rue. A very dignified funeral, a state funeral, a very solemn farewell for David Sassoli here in Rome, as you mentioned there, in the Church of St. Mary and the Angels at the Piazza della Repubblica. Lots of his family, friends, former political party colleagues from the Democratic Party here in Italy, including Enrico Letta, the former Italian Prime Minister. Now, I caught up with him earlier today, and I asked him about some of the policies pursued by David Sassoli, the fact that he want to defend the rule of law, defend democracy and support a humane attitude towards migration. And I asked Enrico Letta whether he thought that those policies would be pursued after David Sassoli's death.
You know, it is under threat because of the difficulty of what is happening in terms of relationship between Europe and some neighboring countries. And the fact that we, the European Union, we don't have enough tools to be very good in stopping what some countries are doing in breaking rights or minority rights. And this is why I think what David made also on these topics is pushing us to try, for instance, in the conference on the future of Europe, to push the idea of a more united Europe, a more integrated Europe, also in the topics related to foreign and security policy, is very important for the future of our continent, because it's showing the possibility for us to be very assertive, to be very proactive, and not to have on these topics countries, the neighboring countries, or Russia, or Belarus, or countries taking the right of minorities in a different approach. So, yes, it is true, these values are under threat, but it is also true that today's, mood in Europe, thanks also to what people like David did and made, is today more, I think, in a growing trend that was the case 5 years ago. 5 years ago we were more under attack on these topics. Today I feel a more positive situation.
Enrico Letta, the former Italian Prime Minister and friend of David Sassoli, the President of the European Parliament, who died earlier this week. Rue?
Thanks very much, Shona. The weeks-long saga involving the world's #1 male tennis star Novak Djokovic continues in Australia. The Serbian player has had his visa cancelled for a second time, just 3 days before the Australian Open begins. It leaves Djokovic facing more court hearings and potential deportation. Matthew in the Cube has more.
Rue, as you say, the affair that's been labelled a circus has taken another twist. For the second time in as many weeks, Novak Djokovic faces the possibility of being deported before his first serve at the Australian Open. On Friday, the country's immigration minister Alex Hawke made the decision to cancel his visa for a second time, saying in a statement that he chose to do so on health and good order grounds, and on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so. He added that Australia's government had considered the evidence but remained firmly committed to protecting the country's borders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Djokovic's legal team are expected to appeal this on Sunday, the second time they will have to go before the courts after the Serbian player was initially detained upon entry at Melbourne Airport. Djokovic is unvaccinated and he acquired a visa to enter Australia with a medical exemption after saying that he had tested positive for COVID-19 last month. Since then, he has admitted that he knowingly broke isolation rules to hold an interview with the French newspaper L'Equipe. And in an Instagram post, he also acknowledged an error in his travel documents, which failed to say that he had visited Spain in the 2 weeks before entering Australia. It was after this that his visa has been re-cancelled, and while the Australian government has been criticised for this late decision, they have remained firm, as has Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who previously tweeted that rules are rules and no one is above them. The decision has also been welcomed by many people in Melbourne, a city that has been locked down for more than 260 days during the pandemic. So what happens now? Well, Novak Djokovic and his team are facing two legal orders, one to prevent his immediate deportation and the second to overturn the cancellation of his visa. His lawyers are optimistic that this will happen in time for him to play as scheduled on Monday. But in the meantime, Djokovic is likely to have to return to a Melbourne immigration detention hotel where he previously spent 4 nights. And Rue, on top of this, if Djokovic is deported, then he faces the possibility of being banned from playing in or even visiting Australia for another 3 years.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, let's discuss this further and speak to Joe Ankier, a sports broadcaster in Miami. Hi, Joe. So in any other circumstances, we'd be talking about Djokovic being drawn in the same half as Nadal. But we're still on this visa issue. That's not a good look for Tennis Australia or the government.
No, absolutely not. I think one of the biggest problems is the back and forth of this situation. Earlier in the week on Monday, it was announced that Djokovic would be allowed to enter the country, that his visa had been allowed after the initial holding back by Australian immigration. Now, Tennis Australia has been on the side of trying to help Djokovic to get past this visa issue with the Australian immigration. Tennis Australia has come out and said that they did go through a 2-stage process working with the Victorian Health Department to try to get the visa put through. This all based on the medical exemption that Djokovic is presenting with him having tested positive for COVID-19 back on December 16th. That positive test comes with its own controversies, however, because Djokovic was seen out in public on the days that followed that positive test. So there's been a lot of mixed matching, a lot of back and forthing, and obviously to wake up today to the news that Australian immigration officials have once again cancelled Djokovic's visa. There will be a meeting in a few hours' time going on with border officials, an interview with Djokovic, and then a federal court hearing on Sunday to determine whether or not Djokovic can play in his opening game on Monday. So definitely not a good look for Tennis Australia. They seem to be working in a different way to the government, who obviously have put forward some very, very strict rules regarding their COVID-19 vaccination policy.
So how has the wider tennis community that are preparing to play in Melbourne reacted to this at this stage?
The big word that's been thrown around is circus. People are calling this a media circus. Rafael Nadal has called this a media circus. I think many of the players want to just focus on their game. This is a major Grand Slam. They've been through a pandemic. They want to make the most of this. Andy Murray came out and said, this isn't the line of questioning I want to be answering at a press conference. Rafael Nadal said that this is unfortunate. We'd like the situation to be resolved one way or the other. Of course, Nadal joked that in some ways he'd rather Djokovic wasn't there at all, because the two of them are both aiming to break the record of being the first person to win the 21st Grand Slam. Nadal, of course, was joking. Even the top tennis players at the top of their game do want the best in the sport surrounding them and to create entertainment for the fans. But there has been a mixed bag of opinions Stefan Tsitsipas, he came out and said that he felt that Djokovic wasn't playing fair. He wasn't playing by the rules. Whereas other tennis players have come out and shown some signs of empathy. The general consensus, though, is that the players, they don't want to be questioned about this. They want the situation to be resolved, and they want to get on with talking about and playing their own game of tennis.
The saga continues. Thank you very much, Joanne Kier. Friday marked the 400th birthday of celebrated French comedy writer Moliere, whose legacy is destined to live on, as Tom Bolton reports.
Moliere became the favourite author of Louis XIV, who lived in extravagant luxury in Versailles. He wrote more than 30 plays and ballets that became immensely successful. Moliere elevated comedy, which had been considered a minor genre, giving the theatre a vital boost.
He was an insanely brilliant playwright. The way in which the characters always bump into doors always makes us laugh. His Italian Lazzi approach was amazing. His descriptions were so acerbic. The imaginary patient, for example, we could say to ourselves, ah yes, that's Professor Raoul. In fact, what makes us laugh the most, and it is a totally frightened laugh, is that in this play the theme of death is absolutely crazy.
At the Palais Royal in Paris, which has since become the Comédie Française, Molière is a king, and it is where he performed with his troupe until his death. Buried in the archives, we can discover how he influenced theatre across Europe.
Moliere's theatre was extremely important on an international level. He even founded some national theatres that completely adapted his plays to the local languages and adapted them to the spirit of their country.
After thousands of performances, he died in 1673 on the evening of a performance, aged 51. The diary of an actor in his troupe has made it possible to re-establish the truth. Molière did not die on stage.
He was taken ill on stage while playing the role of Argan in The Imaginary Patient, but he died at home, next door, on Rue de Richelieu. This chair has a special significance for the cast and in general for the staff of this house, because it's a stage chair. And that, compared to the objects we saw in the library, that's something he had in everyday life. But this is the only thing that remains, something original from his theatre.
His legacy is still alive and his theatre is still modern and topical. Tom Bolton, Euronews.
That's all from Euronews tonight, but do stay tuned for more news coming up.